Okay, I think we're about ready to start. Thank you all for coming. My name is Mark Moore. I'm Program Associate in the Asia program of the Wilson Center. This session will be webcast, so to all you laptop potatoes out there, hello, and I hope you will enjoy the event. We have four very distinguished speakers today. The topic is the Chinese Communist Party, bent but not broken. They are all full professors, so you may have a pop quiz on Tuesday. I don't know. You have their bios, so what I'll do is just introduce each with their title and just one or two sentences on, one or two sentences on what they're going to talk about, and then we'll start. To my far right, which does not express either of our political views, is Professor Bruce Dickson, who's a local. Bruce is Professor of Political Science and International Affairs at GW, or the George Washington University. His topic today will be how the party deals with the growing Chinese economic elites. Many observers have predicted that rapid economic development will bring about eventual political change in China, leading to ultimately to democracy. Dr. Dickson will describe how the CCP is working actively to prevent this outcome by incorporating economic elites into the political system. In my former life as a Foreign Service officer, when I was stationed in Beijing in the late 80s, before Tiananmen, we used to say amongst ourselves that if we were reincarnated, we would like to be reincarnated as a high-level Chinese official, because then you would never have to admit you did anything wrong. This was the late 80s, before SARS and stuff. I think now the ideal would be to be reincarnated as a rich Chinese businessman, because it would be wonderful to have the party try to co-opt you rather than be a student at Beida and suffer the consequences in 1989. All right, moving on. Yen Sun, to my immediate right, is Professor of Political Science at the City University of New York. And today she will look into the party's personnel reforms, asking the extremely interesting question as to whether these reforms will be able to help the party save itself. To my immediate left is Melanie Mannion, Professor of Political Science and Public Affairs at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, as to distinguish from Slippery Rock. And Professor Mannion will spotlight the activity of the party at the local level, something that probably most of you don't examine too closely on a day-to-day basis, examining how the party selects candidates to lead local governments. Finally, last but not least, is Professor Chung Lee, who's now at the Brookings Institution, but he wears two big hats. He's also the William R. Kennan Professor of Government at Hamilton College, and I think the title of his topic today will clearly indicate the substance. After who? I sound like an owl, but in any case, I, of course, thought it should be after who, what. But I am not, fortunately, I am not presenting today, so you can ask questions. After each speaker will speak for about 15 minutes. I have forbidden them to debate amongst themselves, and then we will open up. We should have plenty of time for Q's and A's. So without further ado, did I mention that Professor Dickson is also a fellow at the Wilson Center? So he's resident here this year, so therefore he gets to lead off. Dr. Dickson, it's yours.
I want to begin by thanking the Wilson Center both for hosting me for the year and giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. Thank my colleagues, many of whom traveled farther than I did. I walked up a couple of flights of stairs. Other people had to fly to get here. And most of all, you for taking time out of your day to come hear us share some thoughts. I'm looking at the the way in which the Chinese Communist Party has been able to go against the conventional wisdom that growing prosperity, economic development will lead inevitably towards political change and democracy in the country. This has been a mainstay of American foreign policy towards China for the past 20 or more years, that increased economic interaction and cooperation of China into the global community will facilitate that type of a transition, which is the justification for ongoing economic relations and wider economic ties. It's also a key part of modernization theory that many scholars also looking at China's transition see growing prosperity, urbanization, growing middle class, and so on as being indicators of an imminent transition. However, so far economic development has led to continued authoritarian rule in China under the leadership of the CCP as it finds ways to adapt itself to the new situation in the country. It's doing so by two key ways, which I'll talk about here. One is incorporating these new economic elites into the political system to preempt a challenge from them. And second of all, by adopting new policies to address the type of social problems that are arising as a consequence of rapid growth. The simplest way to look at the relationship between the party and the private sector is the number of private entrepreneurs who are in the party, so-called red capitalists. And the estimates now are somewhere between 35 and 40% of private entrepreneurs are also party members. Most of these red capitalists were in the party before going into business, either former officials. Some of them were managers of state-owned enterprises before they were privatized. But there's also a growing number of entrepreneurs who are being co-opted into the party as a consequence of their economic success. Who does the CCP co-opt? First of all, they're not aiming at the large majority of private enterprises, the mom and shop operations, restaurants, repair shops, service sector. They're going for the large-scale enterprises that both pay a large amount of tax revenue to local governments, employ a large number of workers, and also attract a great deal of foreign investment into the country. So they're targeting the large-scale enterprises, not the smaller. Most of the private sector is dominated by small and medium enterprises. The party is really focusing more on the large-scale enterprises. Beyond that, they're using the same criteria for recruitment that they do for recruitment in general. They favor younger entrepreneurs. Most of them were recruited before they were 35 years old, which is one of the party's general criteria. They're better educated than most. They have a high school or even college degree. Another key factor for the party wants to tie itself to the growing social economic elites in the country, and one definition of that is education. Like they do more generally, they favor men over women. Roughly 80% of new recruits, including entrepreneurs, are men in the country. Women have a much higher standard, much more difficult time gaining admission into the party. In addition, there's another group of people who would like to join the party but haven't done so yet. Maybe 15 to 20% of entrepreneurs who are not in the party would like to be, but for different reasons have not been able to join. Part of it is because the party has set a fairly high standard for recruiting entrepreneurs, mostly as a way of trying to dampen down the notion that it's simply beholden to economic interests. If it opened its doors widely to all the entrepreneurs who want to join, it would be unseemly. And so they've tried to limit the number of people who are able to join to try and show a more broader base of support for themselves. But you put the number of people who are in the party or who want to be, over half of the private sector are either already in the party or would like to be. Now, in contrast, less than 6% of the overall population belongs to the party. Whereas in the past, the mainstay, the largest group in the party were the traditional proletariat, the workers and the farmers. Nowadays, workers and farmers make up less than 40% of party membership. Party has shifted its focus completely towards more urban elites and especially economic elites. In addition to recruiting them into the party, they're also appointing them to political positions. With the upcoming party congress this fall, there will be private entrepreneurs among the delegates to the party congress, as there were last time in 2002. Whether or not they will actually be appointed to the central committee, a much higher profile for them remains to be seen. There were no entrepreneurs added to the central committee in 2002 because the current leadership under Hu Jintao and Wen Jiabao are still sensitive about this relationship between the party and the private sector. They may be reluctant to add to the symbol of having them in the central committee, but it's one important thing for us to be watching for, to look at this closer integration between economic and political elites. But they're also represented in large numbers in the National People's Congress, in local people's congresses. They've been able to successfully run in village elections, for village chief and for village councils. Those who win elections that are not already in the party are invited to do so, and most of them want to join once they've won these elections. One of the motivations for entrepreneurs to join the party is because they want to get involved in politics, and because the party monopolizes most political positions. Entry into the party is also the first step to be able to get into political positions. The party has also been appointing them to administrative posts, executive positions, sometimes actually appointing them. Sometimes these positions are available for sale. One aspect of corruption during the last decade or so is a fairly widespread practice of outright sale of political offices. It's illegal, but done widely. In some communities, people who are big taxpayers are often given a political position as a way of rewarding them for their contributions to the community. Central leadership doesn't agree with these things, but it happens quite widely at the local level. In addition to these types of ways of integrating the party with the private sector, they also show their support in different ways. The party school now routinely, the Central Party School in Beijing, the provincial party schools routinely offer programs, week-long, 2-week-long programs for wealthy entrepreneurs from around the country. Where they're not schooled in the latest ideology, they're skilled in the latest business practices and taught by business professors, mostly Chinese, sometimes foreign professors. This has become such a common practice that there are now travel agencies that have been set up that basically run programs to the party schools and arrange the transportation, the housing, and so on for the entrepreneurs, too busy to do it themselves. In recent delegations by Chinese leaders abroad, private entrepreneurs have now joined the delegations as part of the business ties that are being promoted during these trips. These are all relatively sensitive issues for Hu Jintao and Wen Jiabao because they've been trying to promote a more populist image for themselves and for the party in recent years. Just this spring, the media reportedly was told not to report on Hu's pro-business statements because of the sensitivity of it. But nevertheless, even though they're trying to promote a more populist image for themselves, they've also been having to maintain economic growth at the same time. And so they've been, on the one hand, trying to promote the private sector, incorporate them into the political system, and at the same time try and address the types of social and other problems that have been arisen as a consequence of this often very cozy relationship between business and the state. There's a couple of main problems that have been arisen, which I'll just touch on and explain a little bit more on how the party has dealt with them. And these problems will be familiar with anyone who follows contemporary affairs in China. Corruption has been an ongoing problem, and the nature of this relationship between business and the state is it's not inherently corrupt, but it's easily prone to corruption as businessmen provide bribes to gain large development contracts, as officials expect bribes in order to do routine things like approve licenses and provide access to loans and so on. And it's become an ongoing problem that the party has not yet been able to address effectively. A similar ongoing problem has been rising inequality in the country. China, in just 25 years, has gone from being one of the countries with the lowest levels of inequality to one of the highest levels in just one generation. It has been able to follow the East Asian model of export-led development, has not been able to achieve the East Asian miracle of growth with equity. A third key problem is the pollution that has been generated as a consequence of rapid economic development. China is now the second largest polluter in the world, next to the United States, and it is expected that later this year it will surpass the United States as a generator of greenhouse gases. These problems of corruption, inequality, and pollution, among other spin-offs of rapid development, have led to rising unrest in the country. As citizens around the country have responded to usually very immediate, localized problems, often sweetheart deals between local officials and industrial or real estate developers, bribes that lead local officials to ignore environmental problems or safety standards, other specific complaints that lead to large-scale protests, which seem to have been growing in number and in size in recent years. Now, these protesters often see the central government as their ally in the protest and trying to get the attention of higher-level officials in order to address these problems. So rather than being necessarily a cause of concern for the top leadership, it's often been portrayed as an opportunity for them to deal with the social problems, the unrest that has been arising in the process of rapid development. So let me mention a couple of the ways in which the top leadership has been trying to promote a more populist image, both in rhetoric and in policy, to address some of these types of problems. Under the new leadership of Hu and Wen for the last couple of years, the party's been trying to address the causes of these political protests with a variety of policies that try to balance the need to sustain economic development with the desire to promote social justice. On the one hand, they're trying to limit the rapid growth that's focused on the coastal areas with a more balanced set of policies, shifting resources inland into the countryside. This doesn't sit well with the leaders in the coastal areas who've been relying on rapid development for their own careers. It was the underlying cause behind the ouster of the Shanghai leader Chen Liangyu last year, tied up with a corruption scandal, but behind it was the fact that he was openly resisted the efforts to slow growth in Shanghai and along the coast, and ridiculed the idea that you could have balanced growth in the country. And for that reason, was removed from his post in Shanghai as well as from the Politburo. As they've been trying to limit growth in the coastal areas and shift it towards areas that have not prospered as much, they've also been trying to raise rural incomes, both through direct income subsidies and by lowering taxes. The new leadership has been trying to promote a more balanced growth, of relying not just upon rates of growth, but also concern for other indicators of human development, developing a green GDP index, for example, spending more money on education and medical care, focus more on life expectancy and not just rates of growth as an indicator of economic progress. In addition, they've been trying to target the corrupt deals that have been taking place often among municipal and provincial leaders. They've been trying to target the illegal land grabs that have been one of the main causes of unrest, especially in the countryside, as local leaders confiscate land from the farmers, pay them a pittance in compensation, and then sell the rights to that land to developers for a much higher price and pocket the difference for themselves instead of passing along to the farmers who, now they're removed from the land, are not able to farm anymore, have no means of livelihood. Another way that they've been trying to address this concern of popular unrest was to try and make local governments be more responsive, if not accountable, to their local publics. And just this week there was an announcement of a new initiative that will go into effect next year, requiring local governments to be more transparent in the information they provide local publics about government finances and economic plans, basic statistics, land development, and so on, as a way of trying to prevent local leaders from simply covering up the things that they're doing, both against central policy and against the wishes of their local societies. All this is being done under the umbrella of what the leaders refer to as building a harmonious society. They're betting that improved governance and common prosperity, more than fundamental political reform, will resolve the causes of instability and therefore enhance party rule in the country. So far, there's been little progress made in these different areas. Last week, it was announced that economic growth was over 11% for the first quarter, which surpassed even the most bullish predictions of what the economy was going to achieve. Illegal land grabs, rampant corruption, and inequality all seem to be continuing on as before, despite the intent of Beijing's leaders to rein in local officials. In addition, however, to these more populist policies that go under the rubric of a harmonious society, there's also a sort of a strong arm aspect of harmonious society. They want to maintain harmony. If they can do it by making society happy, that's the best way to do it, but they're not going to let protests grow if they're unhappy about things. So they've been developing at the local level more rapid response police forces to try and preempt protests as they get started. They've tightened up access to what's called the petition system in China, a means by which local people can protest activities or decisions, actions by local officials, and being able to appeal to county level, provincial, central leaders. It's now more and more difficult for people to appeal to higher levels because the central leadership wants protests to stay local, not always bubble up to the top. There's been widely publicized controls on the internet in the country, as well as media coverage of key events as a way of limiting the flow of information to people who may have similar types of grievances. More generally, there's a increased scrutiny and pressure on non-governmental organizations, either domestic ones or ones with international ties. China is deeply afraid of the so-called color revolutions, by which social movements get started on the basis of NGO activity, and then lead to political pressure on the state. Reportedly, Hu Jintao got it on no less an authority than Vladimir Putin that he had to get control of the NGOs if he knew it was good for him. And apparently President Hu thinks he knows what's good for him and is using that advice as one rationale for keeping pressure on NGOs in the country. In this regard, more of an impact has been felt. The number of protests reportedly declined this year, not because society is more happy about things, but because of better intervention, or perhaps because of less complete reporting on the protests that have occurred, as local officials are less inclined to provide bad news higher up, and as the central government is less inclined to announce publicly the number of protests that continue to occur despite its efforts at providing a better social environment for the country. In these different ways, the party is trying to combine the elitist pro-growth policies of the 1990s under leader at the time, Jiang Zemin, with the more populist goals of the fourth generation of leadership under Hu and Wen. There's a recognition that neither extreme of elitism, the pro-growth policies of the past, nor the populism by themselves are enough. They have to be combined some way. Both elements of growth and equity are necessary for the successful reform agenda. Pro-growth by itself creates resentment, widespread resentment and unrest from real and perceived inequalities. The populism that's being promoted now undermines incentives for growth, especially among the beneficiaries of the policies of the past, and therefore a balance is necessary. But the balance is not stable, it's difficult to maintain. In previous years, the policy pendulum often swung dramatically between periods of openness and periods of repression. Today, the pendulum still swings, but not as far as it did in the past and not as rapidly as it did in the past. As Chung Lee has described it, there is a sort of bipartisan consensus among the leadership of the party, recognizing that both rapid growth as well as an equitable distribution, attention to social justice is necessary to maintain party rule. China's continued economic growth therefore continues to challenge the common assumption both within China by the promoters of reform agendas as well as the outside observers of China that a market economy and rapid economic development is the fast track towards democracy and common prosperity. In the short run, in the foreseeable future, it seems more likely that this continued path will lead to a continuation of authoritarian rule under the Communist Party as the top leaders look for ways to govern better, but not necessarily more democratically. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Our next speaker will be Professor Sun.
How do you turn this on?
Are there any audio-visual experts in the crowd? Michael.
Oh, here.
Are we in the way?
No, this is not a full screen, right? Anyway, this is my title. My title is not even here. Okay, here's my title. Okay.
Go through this.
Oh, good. Oh, yeah. Okay, good. Here's my title. Okay, the personnel system I'm talking about here refers mainly to the appointment and promotion and replacement of the key party and government officials. By key government officials, they usually refer to people who hold the chief executive and deputy chief executive positions. So there are 5 levels of the government or political administration in the Chinese political system: the national, the provincial, the municipal, the county, and the township. People talk about village elections, but village is not part of the formal state, not part of the formal political system. So of those 5 levels, I'm mainly talking about the subnational levels, maybe the ministry, deputy ministry, deputy ministers, and down from the central government and down subnational. And I think the national level, the promotional personnel matters would be the specialty of Professor Lee over there, right? So this is mainly promotional matters, recruitment matters in party committees, state agencies, legislative bodies, large state enterprises, law enforcement agencies, and other universities and so on and so forth at those 4 subnational levels. Sometimes there are also a few other, for example, for universities, the provost and the vice presidents, presidents, party secretaries also would be part of this formal personnel system, but not those below. So the personnel reforms are very significant when we talk about the party's fate, of course, because with decentralization and liberalization, there are not many things left for the party to do nowadays. Economic resources, economic powers are gone. So what the party mainly does nowadays is manage human resources. So the Chinese saying is the party manages people and the state takes care of things. So this is the main area of CCP power that's left. This is also, personal reform is also important because of the extent of corruption Professor Dickinson just now talked about, right, among the ranks of the party and state. So according to the party itself, corruption is a matter of life and death for the party. But one has to wonder, why do so many corrupt and potentially corrupt individuals get selected and promoted through the personnel system in the first place? And finally, relating to the topic of today's forum, right, we have to ponder the linkages between the party's authoritarianism and its also gradual maybe decline. So is corruption inevitable in such a non-competitive personnel system? There are opposing views, I would say, as to how the party's personnel reforms have been doing. On one side, we have scholars who argue that institutional reforms have been doing fine. They have helped to improve the professional civil service, improve performance, reduce corruption, and so on and so forth. And on the other side, we also have scholars who argue that decentralization without accountability has actually worsened the problem, the principal agent problems, weakened supervision of these officials. So my own assessment is more mixed. I think it depends on the regions, right? Also, I also have mixed reviews because I do see progress in the evolution of intra-party accountability or some halfway accountability. And a mixture of horizontal and vertical accountability within the party, within the one-party system. And finally, I also have more mixed review because I think the interests of the party and the interests of the individual officials work together actually kind of well, that serve the party and the political system fine. Not all fine, but at least get things done. So going into the approach to personal reforms, I would say very much like China's economic reform. The approach has been of gradualism. And my own view is also that this gradualism is actually preferable to overnight revolution or copy and paste changes. I guess I'm using the word personnel reforms, personnel system. I guess here the easy word would be just one word: elections, right? So here's a list of the directives passed by the Party Central Committee or the Politburo. So I just summarize, I give the main ideas from each of the decrees here. So every time they would introduce some new ideas, try them out in a few places. If they work well, they would expand them, apply to the entire country. So these are the main ideas, but since I'll go over them later on, so I'm not going to talk about them. Trial and expansion. They usually try in a few developed regions, the major cities, the coastal provinces, one or two more of the backward, underdeveloped regions. But even within a rich region, within a rich city or province, they would apply different approaches within the region. Some poor counties maybe have less implementation, and the richer ones have more. So once they see some problems and loopholes, they try to fix them. So developing gradually the coping mechanisms. So this is where the personnel system or recruit system stands now on paper. So these are the original words. The first procedure would be democratic nomination. Democratic nomination means nowadays, on paper at least, procedurally, you're supposed to make open announcements of the openings. Okay, let everyone know there are positions available. And again, democratic nomination mainly applies to deputy positions, positions, not the chief usually. And people have open opportunities to apply for them. You can take exams. So there are nowadays, more than before, multiple sources of nomination. For example, a classmate of mine who had been China's UN counsel to the United Nations just went back and applied to one of these deputy ministers' positions, took the exams, went through the scrutinizing, and now I think he became the deputy bureau 司长, whatever that. Deputy Bureau Chief to the Department of Foreign Policy Research in the Foreign Ministry. The job is basically writing speeches for this foreign ministry's formal occasions. The second step in the process is scrutinizing. Sometimes it looks formally. It looks like how my department would be looking for chairs. You talk to everyone, sound them out, who is capable, who would be good for this, who has good PR. Ask around, get the names, and then you do the opinion surveys, take exams nowadays. You also measure them against the performance records, performance indicators. And because for a long time, especially in the last decade, until a few years ago, the performance indicators were mainly emphasizing quantitative ones, because this is the only one, supposedly you cannot cheat. It's hard, right, not soft, less able to manipulate. So people use GDP growth rates a lot, but then there came a lot of criticism about this usage. We have heard of the bloody GDPs, right? One-sided economic determinism, and so on and so forth. So here I have the latest evaluation index. You are supposed to emphasize the comprehensive strengths of the local economy, meaning not just one-sided, right? Improvement of people's livelihood, social development, social harmony. That means environmental protection. And transformation of government functions, meaning you have made them more market friendly. So in the city I'm from, for example, Chongqing, supposedly the largest city in China now, there used to be a few years ago when I went back, there would be 200,000 migrant workers roaming around everywhere with a stick on their back because trying to carry luggage or carry durable goods or heavy things for people. But until last couple of years, I don't see many anymore. Very few, actually. It was hard, actually, for me to find one. So I asked around why. It turns out that nowadays, training migrant workers actually is one of the performance indicators now. So you see the changes. Actually, I know people may be doing that, officials may be doing that for cynical reasons, but on the surface, you do see the changes. So the next step is called deliberation. So it used to be that people, in the party committee, personnel department is actually, branch of the party. They talk about it, deliberate, and then decide. Usually the party secretary would dominate. But nowadays, the formal procedure requires you actually have to take a vote. The vote is also extended beyond the party committee. You have to go through the standing committee, depending on the positions. And sometimes the party congresses or people's congresses. And finally, of course, the party's dominance is still here, party's leadership, because you still have to go through the higher level to get the formal approval. So here is, I'm not going to go through this in detail. This is the diagram of the initial appointment. More vertical accountability means less democracy because it's a first-time appointment, especially if the candidate is from outside. For example, if the governor is nominated from outside the province, usually there's less of those democratic procedures. Local officials' opinions may be consulted, but they would be nominated and appointed by the higher level party committees or personnel departments. The state chief executive usually has to go, ceremonially has to go through the local legislatures, but the party secretary usually does not. But both the party secretary and the state chief executive then go on to nominate his deputies. But the deputy candidates for the deputy positions have to formally go through the process of public announcement of the jobs, exams, opinion surveys, voting, feedback periods nowadays. The final candidates, they actually put them online, the candidate's name. So you have a week or 10 days period. People can type in their objections, their comments. So there is that period for people to actually make their voices sort of. The reappointment is somewhat more, I would say, more democratic, if you want to use that word, more flexible. There's a little bit more accountability because there's more horizontal one. So for both the party secretary and the state chief executives, you have to go through the annual reviews, have to go through the opinion surveys. It's multiple choice now, so you just, bob the dot. Okay, how is he like this and this? You just fill that out. So for a large corporation, state enterprise, for example, you would have the workers. You can have a whole workers conference or workers representative conference and do this for the CEOs, and for the party campaign or the party members or the it's too large party representative conference to do the multiple choices. And then you go through the scrutinizing and then finally approval and then next level. So there's some mixture of what I call this intermediate accountability. And somewhat ironically, the higher the level, the less democratic, because for a mayor, a governor, or a provincial party secretary, usually people don't know. People who would be voting, doing multiple choices, voting on them, would be the, in a province, for example, would be the mayors from different cities from the province, the county party secretaries, the county magistrates, so and the heads of the different departments in the province. So not all of them have a very intimate knowledge of how the party secretary or the governor of the province is doing. So they usually, officially, just for ceremonially, vote in the official candidates. But the lower the level, people have more knowledge of you. So the hardest actually to get the votes and the good multiple choice in the service would be in a large corporation or in a smaller city. But there are problems, of course, with there's some both problems and the progress with this reform process. Overall, of course, we still see parties' leadership. I guess that's China's second amendment. There are problems, but you cannot touch it, right? But the progress that is, there's more, openness, there's more consultation. So for the nomination process, you can see here the high-level personnel department, they assemble the list of people, okay, through consultation formally, but there's a room, of course, for manipulation if you bribe, if you know them, if you find connections. Then the office of the party secretary at the lower level, the level where the candidates are to be promoted to serve, then discuss the nominees. And then they would go through have a discussion, a meeting, formal meeting at the standing committee of the party committee. This is more progress. This is progress because standing committee of party committee is larger group of people, involves larger group of people. The larger the group of people discussing this, then the harder it is for the head of the party or the personnel department to dominate or to push through his own candidates. But finally, still, you have to still go back to the higher level personnel department, consult them and coordinate and decide on the final list of the people to promote. The second limitation, or what I call area of strength, is the scrutinizing process. So again, still dominated by personnel department, the process reflects their organization personnel interests, is somewhat more non-transparent, but still, the progress is you have to go through the reviews, exams, and surveys, and so on. And finally, the deliberation process, right? The candidates by now are already official candidates, so really are they actually voted out? But the progress is still that there's more and more voting, and the voting has been extended to, larger, more bodies. Okay. And there are more candidates nowadays on the ballot than the seats. That's also a progress. The party's dominance is also visible in other areas of the personnel matters. You can see here, I have the list here. They also do those. So let me move to my final topic here. The problems in implementation. Probably most of the problems exist here, and this is why the personnel system. The hurdles here. So the first problem here is plenty of formality, but not uniformity. So it works well, the reforms works relatively well in the central ministries, in the deputy positions, provincial governments, the major cities, large state enterprises, overall more developed regions, but works poorly, very poorly in the less developed regions, remote areas. Counties would be the most affected area, I would say. The second problem is the proliferation of political achievement projects. Because of the usage of performance indicators, so people, of course, if you have one policy, then people have a reactive policy, right, in response. So nowadays, so you have to do a lot of public projects to promote your GDP growth rates, to improve those numbers, right? So for any visitor to China nowadays, probably you can see easily the lavish constructions, right? Buildings, high-rises, may be empty, may be useless, but they are there, public squares, right? But if you go further, right, you see the poverty. And those are a lot of the projects, because they are short-term, they are not based on long-term planning or efficacy, so you're wasteful. You can have 40 distillers in one province and still building more, because that's, investment generate, hype up your numbers. But once the officials leave, get a promotion, they leave the projects behind unfinished because someone else has to come in and have their own projects. So more and more debts accumulate as the result of that. In the worst case, I think Deputy Governor of Anhui, Huang Huaizong, by the time he left, I think all his political show projects had accumulated such debts that at their current level of payment would take about 100 years for the local people to pay that off. So sometimes they have to withdraw people's salaries and to pay back. The next problem is buying and selling office, not surprisingly, especially in poor regions. The driving force is the room for manipulation because of the dominance of the party. Secretary, you can still bribe. And bribe is a good investment because once you get your office, you can take bribe, so that's your income, right? Pay back the loans and so on and so forth. So the consequences I have listed here, you promote the wrong people, right? You undermine the credibility of the party system, and you build a network of cronies, and that's why more and more China has cluster cases of corruption. So here is I have some examples here of the worst office sellers. If you are familiar with the Chinese provinces here, all the provinces, no exception, except one, let me see, no exception, are poor, underdeveloped regions. And the offenders' positions, mostly party secretary, county level party secretaries. So in China, they have a saying from last decade was transportation minister, but this decade is the personnel department heads. So next problem, dark side of personal life. You can scrutinize, you can go around, ask people, but you cannot find out. This is the blank spot. You don't know what people are doing after the 8 hours of work. But nowadays, right, people expectations, tastes are getting higher and higher. Used to be, just some money would be enough, but nowadays you have to send your kids to overseas, go to universities, Europe and North America, Australia, right? You also have to have a few mistresses, and sometimes you have to keep them exclusive. So that's the difference between hoarding and maintaining. You have to buy apartments and pay their living expenses. Now, you also have children in business. You have to get them projects, right? And nowadays it's also a habit for a lot of them to go to Macau or Las Vegas, actually, to gamble. The final problem here is promotion alongside corruption. So this is very ironic because the better people at maneuvering and manipulating, the quicker actually they get their promotion. So 80s, right? Very soon, a couple of years before you would be exposed because people would know, about it. But in the 90s, it takes about 6 years on average to discover. So I have some example in my next table. More and more surprisingly, also younger people are getting younger and younger. The 59ers, meaning 60 is the mandatory age you have to retire. So a lot of people, the year before they retire, they began to be very corrupt, so that use their power before it expires, right? But then the party always learns lessons and change the policies. So nowadays, around 53, 54, they transfer you to a very unimportant job far away, so that you cannot utilize your power anymore. So people also respond by becoming younger and younger offenders. And with college graduate degrees nowadays. I guess my guess would be they think they are smart enough to beat the system. Maybe they don't have enough confidence in the formal system. They think they can maneuver enough and still survive it. Besides, their kids are coming up for that American university sometime soon, right? It's hard to remove them finally because, again, you have to get the next level to approve it. So if you bribe the next level, have a connection at the next level, so you bypass the process. So these are some examples of the time span, how many years it took for these people to be exposed. You can see it takes longer and longer. And some of these people got promotion every couple of years. So these are my conclusions. So I asked these questions at the beginning. So is cadre deviance and corruption inevitable in a non-competitive personnel system? Yes, because I have talked about the inherent limitations, but at the same time, I think these limitations are also balanced by the process of consultation and progress and the coexistence of non-competitive and more competitive mechanisms. Again, relating to the topic of the forum, right, is such a deviance and corruption out of control that threatens the party, right, its future. Again, I have, as I mentioned, I have mixed reviews because it depends on the regions, the regional disparities. In the cities, major places, they look fine, but in remote, underdeveloped areas, not so fine. And my final point is here is I really see the coincidence of the party's political interest and the individual official's career interest. The party want to get things done, want to get the economy going. The individuals also want to get things done and have their performance indicators there. So they sort of work along so far, and you see the Chinese economy is still going along that way. Okay, here, that's it.
Thank you, Professor Sun. Clearly, there seems to be room for NGOs in the Western world to go to China and teach about good governance because we're such a model here. Professor Mannion, we're going to continue with the local level, right?
Yes. Actually, it was a great pleasure to listen to your talk, Sun Yan, because many of the things I'm going to be talking about fit extremely well with what you have said, although I'm looking at a somewhat different angle. Let me begin. Communist Party rule in mainland China is undermined by incompetence and venality at all levels of leadership. Poor leadership calls attention to the inherent problems of one-party rule, and it undermines the legitimacy of Communist Party leaders. But leaders in Beijing at the top of the party hierarchy understand. They understand that Communist Party survival depends on identifying, recruiting, and promoting excellence at all levels of leadership. Can a Communist Party that concentrates and monopolizes organized political power offer ordinary Chinese citizens excellent leadership? The short answer to this question is not without help. The longer answer, or the 15-minute answer, my talk today, is about a policy, a political survival strategy, which is designed to address this question. It's about a policy to strengthen the Chinese Communist Party by empowering new institutional players to monitor the local party committees as they exercise the most important power they have, the power to select leaders, which we've just heard about. The new institutional players in my story are the local people's congresses, 地方人大. Beginning last summer, Chinese voters have been electing representatives to 5-year terms in these congresses across mainland China, 40,000 townships, 3,000 counties, and these elections are setting the stage for the process of what are called indirect elections, which will take place over the next 10 months, level by level. The county congresses will elect the city congresses. The city congresses will elect provincial congresses. Provincial congresses will elect the National People's Congress. And because the Chinese political system is formally a quasi-parliamentary system, in their first meeting, these congresses will elect government leaders, township heads, deputy heads, county magistrates, deputy magistrates, governors, vice governors, as well as county chairs, judges, prosecutors, nearly 270,000 local government and Congress leaders. Although the Congresses have the legal authority to elect government leaders, as we've just heard, Communist Party committees have what's called nomenklatura authority, and that is the authority to appoint, promote, transfer, and remove all officials of even moderate importance. nomenclature authority extends to elective offices. Now, this creates an interesting situation. The local Communist Party committees, one level up, select government leaders. But these government leaders must be elected by a majority in the Congresses. Now, for decades, this situation was resolved in the usual Leninist fashion. Communist Party committees vetted and pre-selected government leaders. Then, in uncontested elections, members of Congresses who were also elected in uncontested elections raised their hands to ratify the choices of party committees. And this didn't surprise us. For one thing, Communist Party members constituted a majority in all Congresses at all levels. In the early 1980s, the Chinese introduced some contestation in elections to local Congresses. Now, that was a significant reform. It changed the composition of Congresses. But this reform did not change the selection of government leaders. As before, the Communist Party committees vetted and pre-selected government leaders. I call them official candidates, as did Professor Sun. And as before, the members of Congress raised their hands to elect them in uncontested elections for government leadership. Now, this concentration of power to select leaders in the hands of local Communist Party committees can create problems for the party as an organization. Local party committees may have their own private interests uppermost as they vet and select government leaders. In extreme cases, local networks of cronyism, protectionism, and corruption influence party committees to make choices that conflict with the policy goals of leaders in Beijing and weaken the party. The policy to empower local Congresses at the expense of local party committees was designed to address these problems and strengthen party rule. The policy has two components: changes to party regulations, touched on by Professor Sun, and changes to the law. Both of these were introduced a little over a decade ago, 1995. The new party regulations instructed party committees to consult more carefully and widely, as you've heard, when they vet and select the official candidates for local government leaderships. Now, essentially, these regulations imposed new information gathering costs on the Communist Party committees, but they left nomenclature authority intact. They contain no new mechanisms to monitor the party committee performance. They contain no new incentives to align the selection of leaders with the goals of leaders in Beijing, or to enhance the strength of the party as an organization. The more interesting policy change was contained in revisions to the law. These revisions required that most official candidates who were selected by Communist Party committees required them to face electoral contestation from challengers nominated by members of Congresses. In the first elections after 1995, more than 17,000 official candidates lost to Congress challengers. Now, from the perspective of leaders in Beijing, these losses and subsequent losses in elections over the past decade are acceptable losses. They're acceptable because they permit the party center to monitor the performance of local party committees through electoral outcomes. Local clusters of losses signal performance problems. They suggest failures of party committees in vetting and selecting leaders. But these losses do more than signal the quality of party committee performance. They actually change the incentive structure for party committees to reduce the likelihood of these sorts of failures. Of course, this can only work if the prospect of official candidate losses is credible. If official candidates can, in fact, lose, then, by design at least, the official candidates who win after 1995 win differently than before. They win because they're the best candidates, or at least the best candidates the party committees can identify through broad consultation before elections, and better than the candidates nominated by Congresses. Now, this raises two questions about implementation. First, from the supply side. From the supply side, Communist Party members still numerically dominate all Congresses. Congress delegates cannot be, or they cannot only be, electoral agents of party committees, as in past decades. If they are, then these official candidate wins signal nothing to the leaders in Beijing about some good party committee performance. Are local Congresses, in fact, monitoring party committees? First question. The second question from the demand side. Local party committees may prefer the strengthening of Communist Party rule, but not at the expense of their own local rule. How are local Communist Party committees adapting to this challenge, to their absolute prerogative to determine who leads governments? Let's consider first this demand side. Local Communist Party organizations use a variety of methods to ensure that once they have vetted and pre-selected their official candidates for leadership, these official candidates will win. Let me focus today on two methods that practically guarantee official candidate wins: party discipline and controlled contestation. Party discipline delivers official candidate wins because Communist Party members are bound by Leninist organizational rules to support the decisions of a superior party committee. Before the Congresses meet to elect governors, to elect government leaders, the members of Congress who are Communist Party members are called to preparatory meetings. These preparatory meetings introduce the pre-selected official candidates, and they convey the goals of the party committee one level up. Controlled contestation also delivers official candidate wins. The 1995 law mandates contestation, but not for all offices. It requires elections to all deputy offices to be contested, but it also provides a legal loophole for uncontested elections for offices of main leadership, main government leadership, governors and mayors, for example. The local party committees, which set these standards, set the levels of contestation, have everywhere taken the minimum legal standard as the working standard. There are some other practices that control contestation which have no foundation in the law at all, or any formal rules. The most important is what's called soft contestation, rancha. It's widespread. Not all candidates nominated by Congress actually originate with the Congress members. Some of them are designated by the party committees to lose, so that the pre-selected official candidates can win. These partner candidates, 陪选, also translated as escort candidates, agree to be nominated as challengers by Congress members who are also Communist Party members. The goal is high, complete, zero, 高圈零. Official candidates should win with a high proportion of votes, ideally all votes. Congress-nominated challengers should win no votes, not even their own. Now let's look at the supply side. How do we know from looking at electoral outcomes whether Congresses are playing the role assigned them to monitor party committees? Well, we can look at electoral outcomes. If official candidate losses are high, then Congresses cannot be considered as stooges of party committees. This also suggests, however, that the party committees would be performing badly in the selection of leaders, and that's a policy failure, because the policy was designed to reject bad choices by party committees, But it was also designed as a credible threat to party committees to reduce bad choices and promote better vetting and better selection of leaders. So what if official candidate losses are low? Well, then we have to be more cautious in our inferences, because low official candidate losses are consistent with at least 3 scenarios that I can think of. In one scenario, the policy could be working as designed. Then the official candidates selected by party committees win overwhelmingly because party committees have consulted widely and selected the best candidates for leadership. In a second scenario, if party organizations manipulate congresses and rig elections with partner candidates, then official candidates also win. In a third scenario, if nothing has changed, then official candidates win as in past decades in what are essentially appointments from party committees with nomenclature authority. Nothing has changed. Now, in fact, the 17,000 official candidate losses that I noted a little while ago are a small percentage of a very large number of candidates. So these percentages are small. But if we look at this in a different way, if we look only at those offices that must by law be contested, then the picture changes. Official candidate losses in the elections after 1995 ranged from 17 to 27% at government leadership levels below the provincial level. At the provincial level, they're at 10%. In my view, the prospect of official candidate losses, looking at these percentages, is real, is quite real, has to be taken seriously by party committees. The nomenclature system is intact, but Congresses do matter in the selection of leaders. And indeed, the influence of Congresses is understated by official candidate losses, because those official candidate losses can't capture any strategic responses of party committees when they're actually trying to produce fair wins. So what I'm saying is the party has a mechanism, a working mechanism, introduced about a decade ago that transforms local Congresses across mainland China into monitors of local party committees in their most important function, the selection of leaders. I personally think party leaders in Beijing have not been bold enough. They explicitly support a legal loophole that allows the top government leaders in the localities to be selected by party committees and elected without a challenge, these main positions of leadership. Moreover, this entire mechanism stops at the provincial level. It does not go up to the national level. So let me conclude. I've presented this as a story of public management, not as a story of political development. At the same time, it's a story about the empowerment of local Congresses, representative institutions that are elected either directly or indirectly by ordinary Chinese. Not once have you heard me utter the word democratization. If democratization means an expansion of the coalition that selects leaders, then I indeed have been talking about democratization. But do these newly empowered Congresses point to a new proto-parliamentary politics? I think not necessarily. Even if we agree that Congresses are not simply electoral agents of Communist Party committees, this new congressional assertiveness tells us very little about representation, because it's not clear who local members of Congress actually represent. It's not clear if they view themselves as agents of the voters who elect them. In fact, we don't know if they view themselves as agents at all. A few years back, Kevin O'Brien at Berkeley compared these newly assertive members of Congresses to loyal remonstrators in imperial China. These are elites who respectfully raise critical views to represent the best interests of the Chinese state and a harmonious society. Now that resonates with somewhat with the trustee tradition of democratic representation, not at all with the delegate tradition. Congresses clearly matter in the selection of local leaders in mainland China. Whether Congresses are asserting themselves as loyal remonstrators, as trustees, or delegates, or none of the above is much less clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mannion. Now, Professor Lee, with your series of who's.
Okay. Okay. Well, Mark did not mention that I was a fellow 5 or 6 years ago, and along with David Schambach, also in the audience. And so I'm delighted to be back at the Wilson Center and to see my good friends, Bob and others, in the Asian program. I believe that your Asian program represents a forward-looking approach to the American study of China or Asia, represents the Wilson Center's great tradition of interdisciplinary research, and represents an enlightened pursuit of international dialogue. This is what I call three represents, borrowing Jiang Zeming's three represents. Now, my assignment is to offer a few observations about the upcoming 17th Party Congress, because David and I predicted very nicely 6 years ago, so probably this is the reason we are invited to come back. Now, this Congress, which is probably the most important event in China this year, the Party Congress will be an occasion for change in China's top leadership and for new directions in China's domestic and foreign policies. Now, in the following 12 minutes or so, I will address 4 questions. First, why is the 17th Party Congress critically important? Second, what are the defining characteristics of elite politics in China today? Thirdly, who are the rising stars in the so-called fifth generation, the generation is going to succeed Hu Jintao's generation? And finally, how will the collective characteristics of the new generation of leaders influence China's trajectory? Now, first, why is the 17th Party Congress critically important? There are 2 main reasons. One is, and this will be an anticipated landslide takeover by the fifth generation leaders. I will explain just in a few seconds. Second is the question about related to Hu Jintao's successor, whether the successor will be designated. This is also the question I call after who. Who? Right, different who, different spelling. Now let's look at the first one. This is the highest leadership organ in China, the 9 members of standing committee. Look at their age, and in my view, about half of them will retire because of age. And maybe even 2/3 of them will step down. This is 9 members of standing committee, the highest level of the decision-making circle. Now, look at these 3, the average age of these 3 most important leadership organs. The Politburo, the 9 people I just mentioned, the average age already 67. The next level, 25 members, including these 9, the average age is 66. The Secretariat, which deal with the daily events, and usually young members, also the average age is 65. They are not so young. Now, look at the entire Central Committee, about 356 people. 241 of them already above 60 years old. So which means 67.7%, about 68% already above 60 years old. Among them, there is the 4 members, 198 is among these 356, is a high level. 175 of them above 60 years old, about 88.4%. So what that means? That means that about 60% of the Central Committee members will retire. Now, again, 50% of both the Politburo and its standing committee member, the 24 and 9 people, 50% will step down. All except 1 in the 7 member of Secretary, except Liu Yunshan will stay, all other 6 will retire. And 3 out of 4 vice premiers and 4 of 5 state councillors in the state council will retire. Of course, that the state council will not change until 2008 when they have the National People's Congress. But the personnel, the appointment will be decided in the 17th Party Congress. So again, about 8 or 9 out of 10 the State Council top leaders will be replaced. China's financial economic team will completely change, including retirement of Huang Ju, executive vice premier, and Wu Yi, who is really economic czar. She will come for the economic strategic dialogue. And Zheng Peiyan and Hua Jianming all will retire. And the foreign policy team, the current minister and also the director of the Foreign Affairs Office in the Central Committee, and the state councilor in charge of foreign affairs, Tang Jiaxuan, all will retire or move to the second front. Now, military leadership, also a large number of, I do not know the detail, it's difficult to assess, but also about half of them will step down. This is the Central Military Commission. And also, again, as I mentioned earlier, 60% of the Central Committee will be replaced. Now, this is, in a way, it's not entirely new. Look at this chart. This from 12th Party Congress, 1982, 13, 14, 15, and 16. They all have the very high level of turnover rate, a range from between 57 to 68%, around 60%. So, of course, we talk about China. China is no democracy, but the leadership turnover rate is very fast, much faster than our Congress or Senator. Now, the second most important question is Hu Jintao's successor. Whether will be designated, how will be designated. There are two options. One is choose one core leader among equals, among others, very much like Hu Jintao. When he was appointed as standing committee member, put him in a very good position. These 10 years, this is from 1992 to 2002, these 10 years gave him opportunity to be accepted by the people, by his colleagues, and tested, etc. But now time is running out. The next successor is the maximum only have 5 years. Now, you can choose one leader, but it's not clear who will be that person right now. And so the backlash could be also overwhelming if you decide to choose that option. Now, the second option is to promote 2 to 4 new stars to compete with each other, put them to the standing committee with the same age, similar age. But this also will be quite risky because it really opens door for real competition or political lobbies eventually. Right? Now, I don't know which options they will choose. I don't think the top leadership is very clear about that. And on the one hand, you see the rhetorics talk about collective leadership. On the other hand, they also want to maintain the stability or the continuity of leadership. So it's really, in my judgment, it's a 50-50%. Probably in the next few months will become clearer, a little bit clearer. But eventually, I think they will go to the next one. But whether the 17th Party Congress will do that, we don't know. But in my view, the 18th, they will have some more votes in the Central Committee in the political leadership. Now, second question, what are the defining characteristics of elite politics in China today? Now, I think there are 3 trends very clearly. One is from an all-powerful strong man in decision-making, such as Mao or Deng, towards a collective leadership in which the top leader is no more than the first among equals. The second trend is from the zero-sum games of the past to an emerging pattern of power sharing among competing factions, regions, and social groups. Now, this noon I was speaking to the White House fellows, and I just mentioned to them that the zero-sum games in Chinese, anyone knows the zero-sum games in Chinese? Yeah, 零和, but also that in Chinese called 你死我活, I win, you die.
Yeah.
Now, that was the Chinese politics. I win, you die. But that period was over. Now, you still can play golf, probably, if we losers. Now, also a trend to what I call, what they call inner-party democracy, or what I call one party, two factions. Again, I borrow from Deng Xiaoping's famous line, one country, two systems. Now, let's look at this one party, two faction formulas. There are 4 major components. One is that these two factions represent two different social, political, and geographical regions. I will elaborate just in a few minutes. Secondly, they have different policy initiatives and priorities, as Bruce mentioned earlier. You do see the major policy change under Hu Jintao really changed the course of China's development, particularly, to Jiang Zemin's very much elitist approach. And they are complementary to each other in terms of leadership skills and expertise. And finally, they compete with each other on certain issues, but are willing to cooperate on others. Bottom line is they are in the same boat. Now, let's look at some of the evidence. First is about the difference of composition of the two coalitions. The first I call populist coalition consists largely Tuanpai officials. You will probably hear this word a lot in the next 5 to 10 years. Tuanpai will dominate, will control a lot of leadership organs. Tuanpai is which means that those leaders advance their careers through the Chinese Communist Youth League. Particularly, they were national or provincial youth league officials when Hu Jintao was in charge of this organization. The Chinese call them Tuanpai. Second is party functionalists, work in the organization, propaganda, and principle, party discipline, and etc. And they come from also a lot of them from rural grassroots officials, move step by step, and in the agriculture, rural administration, and etc. And also, they usually consist a lot of provincial leaders, usually from inland regions, or what we may call China's red states. Now, in contrast, elitist coalition consists of Shanghai Gan. Now it's not doing so well, but it still survives. Second is princelings, children of high-ranking officials. A lot of them you will see enter the policy bureau. It will be embarrassment if too many. Now, also entrepreneurs, capitalists, whatever, including state-owned companies, CEOs, and maybe also some private as well. Returnees, those so-called 海归派, sea turtles, because pronunciation of foreign educated returnees and the 海归派, the sea turtles are the same pronunciation in Chinese. They all overwhelmingly located in the coastal region, and also urban leaders, especially from coastal region. Of course, we can call them China's blue states. Now, these are the composition. Now, let's look at the differences in terms of policies. Populist coalition, very quickly, is concerned about social cohesion, the word of social harmony, the focus on a more balanced regional development. It's already happening. And about half a year ago, I went to Chongqing with the Brookings delegation. We were told by officials in Chongqing, they told us that Chongqing now has more cranes, construction machines, than Shanghai does. As we know that Shanghai, a few years ago, claimed it held 1/6 of cranes in the world. But Chongqing has such a fast development during the past few years, largely because of Chongqing's top leader, party secretary, actually is a protege of Hu Jintao. He got a lot of money from state investment, this kind of development. So it's already happening. Now, the emphasis on the 以人为本, people-centered rhetoric, and talk about, advocate so-called green GDP, and finally pays great attention to peasants, migrants, and urban poor. Now, in contrast, elitist coalition, they still think the efficiency is the key. Priority should be economic development, and favor a coastal development strategy, and less concern about environment, and emphasis on rapid GDP growth. The famous line by Deng Xiaoping is, development is the hard truth. And finally, represent the interests of entrepreneurs and emerging middle class. Now, in terms of the also division of labor, they actually have the different kind of strengths. And for the populist coalition, they control party organization, propaganda, united front, law and the party discipline, and a large number of provincial leadership seats. In contrast, elitist coalition control economic administration, foreign trade, finance, foreign affairs, education and science and technology, and military affairs. Now, after 17-party Congress, generally this pattern will remain. Maybe the military affairs will go to the middle. Both factions will share rather than just very much controlled by Jiang Zemin or his proteges. That some of the seats will go to Hu Jintao's people. Right. Now, second question, who are the rising stars in the fifth generation? I wanted to single out 5 of them, belong to 2 different factions. And when Li Keqiang, Li Yuanchao, Wang Ya, let me just very quickly talk about their bios. He was born in 1955 from Anhui province, Hu Jintao's home province. And education, he got a PhD in economics, BA in law, both from Beijing University. And the main career path is from Youth League. Previous experience, he served as secretary of the Youth League, Hunan governor, Hunan party secretary, now is Liaoning party secretary. He has experience in 2 largest provinces, one agriculture, one industry, and also worked in the Youth League for 16 years. So very much like Hu Jintao, he has a solid power base within the Youth League network. And he was a full member of the 15th and the 16th Central Committee. So has a longer tenure than most of his peers. The second one, also Li Yuanchao, Jiangsu Party Secretary, born in 1950 in Jiangsu, also has a PhD in politics and law, and main career path also from the Youth League. And he also spent some years in Shanghai. He is son of the former vice mayor of Shanghai. His experience is the secretary of Shanghai Youth League, deputy director of the Information Office at State Council, vice minister of culture, Nanjing Party secretary. And but he actually was very much disappeared or in the not so important position for 20 years until a few years ago, Hu Jintao reappointed him to Nanjing Party secretary and soon Jiangsu Party secretary. So he is more to do with the Youth League faction Tuanpai than the Shanghai Gang, although Shanghai Gang probably also can accept him. Now he was also visiting scholar at Harvard and Kennedy School 4 years ago and speaks very good English. Now, the third person is Wang Yang. The person claimed that Chongqing has more Koreans than Shanghai, and born in 1955, also from Anhui, and educated master degree in management science, and Youth League career path, and had experience as secretary of the Anhui Youth League, vice governor of Anhui, vice minister of a very important ministry called National Development and the Reform Commission, and also served as a deputy secretary general, deputy chief of staff of the State Council. So has broad experience in both central and local government. And recently he asked all his colleagues, county levels leaders in Chongqing, to study Tom Friedman's book. The word is flat. Sounds like he's pro-economic globalization, etc. Now he is an alternate member of the 16th Central Committee. Now these are 3 all belong to the Youth League, and they are the front runners. Highly likely, and one of them or 2 of them will be in very top positions. Now the next one is Xi Jinping, belong to the other faction, elitist faction, born in 1953 from Beijing, and a PhD in politics and law from Tsinghua University. And main career, there's so many PhDs. I mean, this is fascinating. And 20 years ago, Chen Xuesen, Deng Xiaoping's advisor in science and technology, China's father of missile development, argued that in the 2000, all county level leaders should have undergraduate degree. All municipal leaders should have master degrees. All ministerial level should have PhDs. When I wrote that, my secretary said, he just laughed. He said, how could you imagine a country run by PhDs? You guys cannot run our copy machines. No, but they're coming very close, very close. You will see a lot of PhDs. Of course, most of them actually middle career, later on, not from the, but of course there's some exceptions. Now, also a son of a former vice premier, well connected, and the previous experience, Fuzhou City Party Secretary, Fujian governor, they always in good location in coastal region, Zhejiang governor, and now recently appointed party secretary of Shanghai, and the alternate member of 15th and the full member of the 16th Central Committee. Now, last one is Han Zheng, the Shanghai mayor. Most people said that he's out. He's not out. I think he will come back. Nice suit. And born in 1954 from Shanghai, and graduate from the same university I graduated. And I actually interviewed him a while ago. And main career is economic and municipal administration, and the previous experience as secretary of the Shanghai Youth League, but he's more to do with Shanghai faction, head of Luwan district, very, very much instrumental to the so-called Xingtiandi project, in Shanghai, and Shanghai vice mayor, and a member of the 16th Central Committee. Now, these are 5 front runners. But if you ask me single out of one, it's difficult. Maybe Li Keqiang is in a good position, but I don't know. I simply don't know. Now, but of course, there's some other contenders, but they're not born in 1950s, a few years older. They probably will enter Politburo, even standing committee, but they will not be Hu Jintao's or Wen Jiabao's success, because Chinese obsessed with age. You should have like the next 10 years, not just 2 or 3 years younger. Now, these are also could be major players. And I'm sorry, I should really put the different colors, also from different factions. Right? Liu Yandong, Wang Jishan, Ma Kai, and Dai Xianglong. They are still, they are not so young, but they also have in the future to get promoted to the next Politburo. Now, one important thing is the so-called Tuan Pai. Their number is already increased very significantly. Now, look at this. This is the study of the provincial chief, meaning governors or party secretaries in China, altogether 31 provincial administrations, so 62 people. The Tuan Pai leaders, who is Hu Jintao, from 5 of them in the September 2002, before the party congress, 16th party congress, to 13, and to now 20. So it's almost 1/3 of the provincial chiefs. As we know, that the provincial chiefs are the stepping stones for national leadership. So they are in very good positions. For further promotions. So Tuan Pai will be a very formidable force. Now, but the Tuan Pai has a problem. What's the problem? They do not have expertise in foreign trade, finance, economic development, foreign investment. They are very good in what Sun Ye, Professor Sun mentioned about harmonious society, grassroots mobilization, etc., propaganda, kind of like down-to-earth person. But they are very weak. They have no experience. These are the 22 Tuan Pai leaders currently serve as provincial chiefs. Only one person, newly appointed Jilin governor, has a little bit of experience in finance. All others, nothing. So what does that mean? That means they have to compromise. They have to rely on the other faction. They have to share power rather than dominate power. Now, last one. How will the collective characteristic of the new generation of leaders influence China's trajectory? 2 things I want to say. One is the question, will the technocratic era end? As we know, these 9 top leaders, standing committee members, are all engineers, all technocrats, but that will come to an end. Second is, will substantial political reform take place? These are the 2 major questions. Now let me look at it very quickly. The first one. This is a study I did about 20 years ago about the China's mayors, about 250 mayors. Now, these about 74%, 3/4 are engineers or natural science by training, so they are technocrats. The similar pattern could be found in the Chinese ministers and vice ministers, about also 200 of them. This is 20 years ago. So this is what I call, people can call the dominance of technocrats. Now, but that's come to end. This is just the last month. Look at the 62 provincial chief, top leaders. These technocrats, and it decreased to 33%, from 74 or 75% to 33%. This kind of a change. Now, this is interesting chart. From 1982, technocrats just start to emerge. This is look at the minister, look at the provincial secretary, look at the governors. Only 2%. I think one is Li Peng. I forgot the other one. Yeah, this is 1982, right? Now, 1987 increased dramatically, 45%, 25% among provincial secretaries, 33% among governors. 1997, in my view, reached a peak. All these categories above 70%. But now, I think, rapidly going down, probably will be 30%. So it's a bit more different kind of educational background leaders emerge. Now, I want to conclude I don't want to give to say what all this means. I will let you to tell me what that means. But just one thing, I want to raise a question. Now, what do these people have in common? First, Chen Shui-bian, President of Taiwan. Li Xiulian, Vice President of Taiwan, our good friend. Ma Ying-jeou, former mayor of Taipei. Li Keqiang, I mentioned to him, one of the front runners. Wai Ying is a woman who was appointed as the Minister of Justice 2 or 3 years ago. And finally, the youngest governor, newly appointed governor of China, governor of Hunan, Zhou Qiang. Now, what do these people have in common? No, only 2 of them went to Harvard. Only Ma Ying-jeou and Li Xiulian went to Harvard. Under 60, you're right, they're under 60, but that's probably, if I raise that question, probably it's a little bit silly. Right? Yeah. Oh, lawyers. I leave that for you what that means. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Obviously, it means there will be more lawyer jokes in China, and we will have common culture. All right. Thank you, panel. And now we have at least 25 minutes for Q&A, so it's over to the audience. Questions? Wait for the microphone and identify yourselves because we are being webcast, so you will be recorded for posterity. Okay, let's start with this gentleman.
Thank you very much.
Oh, and state your name and
Nick Berry, Foreign Policy Forum. It's on the same subject, but more towards policy. How is foreign policy tailored to support the legitimacy of the Communist Party? No one's mentioned foreign policy. It seems to play a very large role.
Do process? We're on.
No, we're on.
I'll just start on that. Nationalism is an extremely important basis of Chinese Communist Party legitimacy today. And the closest issue that touches on nationalism is Taiwan. And so I have to say that when you discuss Taiwan with many Chinese with whom you can be having a very rational conversation, when you discuss Taiwan, sometimes the conversation changes rather dramatically. And so the Chinese Communist Party has played a nationalism card in its foreign policy, and Taiwan is the big issue there. Other countries less so, sometimes the United States, but certainly Taiwan.
Well, we hear a lot about the so-called China's rise. And in my view, China is on the rise. And so Chinese leaders are in very good shape because they think that that will further enhance their legitimacy at home. But in my view, that there's some major change in terms of the basis of legitimacy. People here talk about the Chinese Communist Party always use the economic growth as the legitimacy, the basis of legitimacy. But in my view, now this already become secondary. Actually, leaders try very hard during the past few years try to cool down China's economic growth, and because the so-called macroeconomic control policy. So their worry is the distribution, is the economic disparity. So the social issues, the tensions, environment, social tensions, economic distribution, that become a major important component of legitimacy. This also tells us, if that's the case, they probably less worry about their, you do see more kind of confidence among these top leaders. Of course, still, their ultimate legitimacy is what they perform at home. But of course, China's image in the international arena is important. It's still bad image, But on the other hand, from their perspective, this bad image is the outside fault, not their fault. Because anti-China, coalition or China threat, this kind of people, conservative, hardliner in the outside world. So, also that Bruce mentioned, his study indicates so well that they also, some of the possible critics of Chinese regime also change intellectuals, middle class, entrepreneurs, these kind of things. So again, this all come from the point, probably the China's foreign policy will be less important than some of the domestic issues. But I just wanted my colleagues to say. Yeah.
I think one of the key changes among the current leadership from before was there's less of a focus on having the United States as the end-all and be-all of Chinese foreign policy. This is more prominent during the Jiang Zemin era, and one of the things that he was criticized for is going too far to accommodate American pressure. China now has a more active diplomacy, active in Latin America and Africa, throughout Southeast Asia, largely economically driven in their search for resources around the world, but also a desire to have more of a balanced foreign policy and not just have their foreign relations dominated by the U.S.-China relationship.
Michael.
Michael Yehuda, a fellow here. I'd like to ask Chung Li a question. You use the term faction or pai a lot. Now, what does that actually mean? Because it seems to be something much looser than is conveyed by the English term faction. And is it a basis on which you simply trace congruence of career patterns? Has it something to do with what the Chinese call guanxi? Is it something to do with the notions of trust? Or what? I'd like greater clarification.
The most important thing is who appoint me for that position. It's a political network to whom I should show my loyalty. Now, under Jiang Zemin, the Shanghai Mafia controlled the most important positions because these people, he trusts them. These proteges also show their loyalty to Jiang Zemin. Now, right now, Tuan Pai is already moving to the driver's seat, and they certainly attribute their rise and to Hu Jintao. Right now, but of course, these factions in China still not legitimate and still not transparent. Although you ask any taxi driver, they will tell you which one belongs to which faction. Largely, 95% correct. And so it's not completely in the dark. But of course, they still don't want to, claim I belong to that. If you ask them, no, there's no such thing called Tuan Pai. There's no such thing called Shanghai Game. So these kind of factions, and it's quite an informal and network at the moment. And they come together and they help each other. They share similar views, similar policies. But at the same time, it's still legally it's banned. So I hope that they will become more and more confident about faction politics. Of course, factional politics is not something new. It exists all the time. But difference is it's no longer zero-sum game. This one. And also, there's a mechanism. They realize they should deal with the four things, all these 4 points I mentioned. We should treat them together. They are not. No faction is powerful enough to defeat the other, because others have a lot of resources. Also, others have legitimate need. So this kind of dynamics. So I hope that these kind of factional parties will follow what happened in Japan, the LDP, this kind of development. And so this probably is the best scenario for China, because the Communist Party does not have an organized opposition at the moment. Right. Now, certainly that the Congress, local elections, this could be also important. But in the party democracy, competition is also an important component for change. Along with the rule of law, local elections, grassroots elections, and also separate between state and the government, and state and the party and the army. These issues are not solved, right? So I answer your question is largely it's loyalty. It's you attribute your rise, your appointment to whom.
Okay, and we'll just.
I read a recent article in the New Yorker, quite interesting, about the imprisonment or continuing imprisonment of a young man who was very interested in starting a new party, and then he's serving a very severe sentence. Is the same situation continuing? In other words, there probably can not be a true democracy without a 2 or 3 party system. Is it still prohibited to be involved in a second party?
Yeah, the Communist Party monopolizes organized political power. Political parties that are not supportive of the Communist Party. You have satellite parties that work in cooperation with the Communist Party, but political parties that are opposed to Communist Party rule or that are not cooperative with the Communist Party are not tolerated. And Li Cheng, is right about these nascent factions, but factions within the party as organized units are banned. So
I'm Victor Basser, consultant in national security policy. This is a question really to everybody. Somehow each one elaborated on certain aspects of developments in China, but my question is very simple. My question is really Communist Party losing in the long run power in China or not? And what are the factors that are undermining the power of the Communist Party in China? Second question is very simple. Does anybody have a year when the United States will be overcome by China in GDP, gross domestic product? Goldman Sachs came out, it will be 2039. But I don't know on what basis they concluded this. Do we have a more reliable figure, say, assuming that China is growing conservatively at 8% for the next several years?
How about when China will overtake us in good governance? But anyway. Okay.
Yeah, I think organizationally, the party is definitely losing and has already lost, and it is, I think, recognized it, is very much worried about it. The main driving force is the socio-economic change. The socio-economic change in the past 2 or 3 decades has mainly contributed to the rise of new social classes. The social pillar of the Communist Party used to be 2, the farmers, the peasantry, and the working class. But nowadays, those are the 2 main losers, social groups, out of all these reforms. And out of the reforms, we have some new social classes: the professional class, technocratic classes, urban middle class. And most of these people, new middle classes, are employed in joint ventures, foreign corporations, or private, or otherwise not state. So therefore, they have no obligation, no interest nowadays, no career interest, no material interest to join the party nowadays. So nowadays, the party has tremendous difficulty recruiting party members, expanding the party cells, party organizations in those non-state organizations and corporations. You have a lot of numbers showing that that people are not willing to. People, no one applies. They have no interest in doing activities because, used to be you get housing benefits, promotion, all those material interests associated with multi-party membership. But nowadays, if you're employed outside the state sector, there's no, why bother, takes up your time. So nowadays, organizationally, the party is losing that ground. And the party nowadays has 2 alternative approaches. They have 2 new party organizations nowadays. One is neighborhood-based. So the new apartment rises nowadays in the neighborhood. You have a party organization. Everybody, from everywhere now have party meetings. But at those party meetings, they don't talk about party affairs. They talk about garbages and the housing management and health care and good schools, those kind of things. The other alternative the party has already developed is a professional organization for parties. That is, during daytime, party members from different private sector can get together one afternoon and have a meeting. But in those kind of meetings, gatherings, people talk about jobs and how bad is your management, how well you get paid in that job, and they talk about those professional things. So in a way, I see more the rise of the kind of parties in a sort of neighborhood party in the West, community party in the West, maybe the beginning of something new. So the main force actually nowadays, the main recruiting ground for party nowadays is college. Before you get them into the real private world, get them into the party first. Even in the state organizations, I have to say, people, really competent, professionally qualified people have less and less interest to become party secretary, party officials. They don't mind being the state ones maybe, but they don't want to be the party ones. Usually it's the ones without real job professional skills, retired people from the army, or people who are not good professionally, I'm sorry to say this, but become party secretaries. And it's really no dead-end job, because once you're retired in the mid-50s, you are unemployable, your skills. I interviewed one party secretary who was a workers, peasant, soldier student. And his English major, English not good. So he became party secretary, now 53. He's getting retired. So I'm actually, after interview, I'm trying to get job for him, but everybody said, what can he do? So that's the organizationally, definitely, I think it's newly. But at the upper echelons, I would actually agree with Professor Lee. It is also changing and losing hold because of this factionalism. In the long run, you see the type of Japanese type of, maybe organization coming out of the party.
Can I add?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the one line is really overlooked by China Watch communities. You look at the party document, the 16th Party Congress actually has a line saying that the Chinese Communist Party was not born inherently and may not last forever, will not necessarily last permanently. I don't know whether it's a good translation or not, but there's such a line. So therefore, they wanted to keep abreast with the time, to try to change its bad image, try to recruit new blood, and etc. Now, because of Hu Jintao's remarkable policy change, he basically saved the Chinese Communist Party, in my view, right? If Jiang Zemin's approach continued, China probably is on the verge of major crisis, because these have and have not, this kind of conflict. But it's remarkable the party can adjust to a new environment, adapt to a new environment, try to fix it. But for long, the real question is how long they can last. So someone said the party will stay forever for another 20 years, and that's too old, the party. But I think that, but someone said the party, like someone predicted, it already collapsed. Or, according to Gordon Zhang's book, it should be collapsed last year, but did not happen. Now, we should find the power. How can they last? There are several indicators. One is that I talk about the Tuan Pai. Tuan Pai probably will be with China for the next 5 to 10 years. This is a very capable group of people. You probably can be cynical about they talk about propaganda, grassroots, but they are very capable people in many ways. So that can help. But after Tuan Pai, there's a real crisis. Now, if you look at the children of high-ranking officials, my colleague Min Xingpei also did that study. Current leaders, Hu Jintao, Wen Jiabao's generation, look at their children's career. None of them in Tuan Pai, in Communist Youth League. None of them actually in the political establishment. They all work for foreign companies, work for CEOs, research, etc. Some of them actually have the English name, Winston Wing, Larry Zhu, David Lee. I wish I have an English name, maybe Charlie Lee. So that tells you a lot. That tells you a lot about the 10 to 15 years down the road. It will be different game. And what kind of game? Of course, this is what we should study about what kind of transition, whether transition will be peaceful or violent. And that would be crucial.
I think they're all political science professors here, so the economic question will move to Bert Keidel at Carnegie. They just did a study. And we only have time, unfortunately, because we're being webcast, for 2 questions, but I'm sure the panel will stay. So if you have questions, please come up. But we'll have 2 or 3. Let's do that. So, you had your hand up, sir. And then we'll do on that side.
Nguyen Minh Hùng from George Mason University. I'd just like to thank you very much for the excellent presentation. I have a question, I think, follow up on the statement by Mr. Cheng Li. This question, Professor Dixon talked about the Communist Party co-opting economic elite into leadership. My question is is it possible for those entrepreneurs to rise to the top positions of the CCP? And if so, what is its impact on the nature of the CCP? Or is it too soon a question to ask?
I think there's almost no chance that either a private entrepreneur or even someone coming from a state-owned enterprise career would rise to the top. The relationship between business and the party is still so sensitive, especially for this current generation of leaders. They don't want to seem that they're so beholden to economic interests they would actually put an entrepreneur into such a high-powered position. Locally, that you may have more influence, but I think it's too touchy of an issue at the top level. Even at the 16th Party Congress, when they made a big deal about incorporating the 3 Represent slogan into the party constitution, which was the justification for recruiting entrepreneurs into the party, the only person who was elected, even to the alternate member of the Central Committee, Jiang Ruimin, who was part of the Haier Corporation, got one of the smallest number of votes of all the people. So even among the delegates to the Party Congress, it was still seen as not appropriate to have someone with a business background in a position of high political power.
But in 20 or 30 years, if they do change, if the society changes, then the next generation of American China watchers can write a book about China Inc.
I'd like to follow up on a comment that Professor Lee made. How likely is it that the Chinese Communist Party will evolve into a version of Japan's Liberal Democratic Party? And does anyone dare mention this publicly as a goal?
You mean in China?
Yes, yes.
Well, yeah, several people mentioned that. Actually, He Weifang, a law professor at the Beida, actually had the same view as I just argued, one party, 2 factions. And of course, at the moment, he's still criticized in China, but he's still a law professor at Beida. And also that I want to share with you, which was a surprise to me, and we visited the Central Party School in October with a delegation. And the vice president of Central Party School, his name is Li Junru, we asked him, do you foresee at the time when these kind of different interests in the government, in the party, and or different we use the term factions, that we reach out for the public for support, different groups for support, different regions for support, then the party will split. I thought that he definitely would say, oh, no, that's impossible. Party will unite together, and whenever that happen. But he only said, only time will tell. This is by Li Jinru. Yeah. I took notes. Yeah.
You have the notes.
Yeah.
And you remember.
I wanted to ask about the rise in real unions, at least in the foreign sector, and at least the whole populist faction. That is that there really is a whole slew of party members now who are really thinking through this whole ideology and thinking about returning to and really quite disturbed. Maybe they're all in this populist faction. Maybe they're all in the western side of the country. But I want to know whether, as you said, all the sons of the leaders are working in international firms, obviously, and you said just now that that the leadership cannot come from these foreign firms. Isn't there some hope for a return to some form of real, social justice and through the party?
Just for the last 5 or 10 years, there's been a trend among intellectuals, a so-called New Left movement. It's influenced very much, not so much in traditional Marxism, but influenced by sort of a European-style social democracy, a concern for social justice, for equity, sort of a green movement in general. And some of their ideas are echoed in the populist policies of Hu and Wen. Not that they're terribly influential, but I think they have a similar viewpoint on the problems facing the country and what to do about it. There isn't a lot of attention given to being consistent in terms of ideology. The idea that you're going to somehow revert back to party origins of the ideological basis for its remaining in power, for derivation of policy, doesn't have much influence with much support within the party and probably none within the general public. I think the idea that policies are inconsistent with traditional party ideology doesn't matter a whole lot. They find ways of adapting the ideology to fit the needs of the time. The Free Represent slogan is a perfect example of how you basically abandon your reliance on the proletariat and say, now we're going to focus on the urban economic elites as our real base of support. They find ways of dressing it up to fit the policy rather than finding ways of making policy conform with the prevailing ideology. Similarly, in response to the last question, I think one of the obstacles facing the parties, the extent to which it can adapt, is that all the examples it has of parties that have really transformed themselves led to disaster. The Kuomintang in Taiwan lost power. In the Soviet Union, again, political transition led to the end of the Communist Party as a ruling party. It looks at social democratic parties in Europe as having an ideology that it would like to promote, but it involves being involved in an electoral system, and that involves the risk of losing an election. So all the alternative models for its current one-party monopoly all present the very real